When I was 17, I took my first job as a caretaker and house sitter. I had to take care of an elderly woman, Mrs. Waters, who was super rich, and I had to look after her mansion home. My job was to cook for her, do her laundry, get her everything she needed, take her on walks in the garden, clean the house, and look after the house when she was traveling abroad for her treatments. I used to live there, and without a family of my own, I felt like it was the perfect job for me. Mrs. Waters, on the other hand, did have family, a lot of them, but no one ever came to visit her, not on her birthdays or any other occasions, at least not in the 2 years I worked there. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button and activate the notification bell, and you'll find out who has a crush on you soon. Trust me, it works. For her sake, I would even make invitation cards and send them out, but they would not show up. I appreciate what you're doing, child, but they would not come. They haven't even called for years, she would say, trying to console me, but I knew she was hurt inside. However, even though no one from her family ever came to meet her, there was one member who was an exception, her grandson. His name was Casper, and he was also super rich like his grandma and had no parents like me. In fact, he had become a millionaire at just 20 from the incomes of his own business. He was also a bit handsome, but too proud of a guy to even say hi to me once in all the times he visited. I don't know why he never talked to me, so I made an assumption that it may be because of the difference in our status. He was a millionaire, and I was just a poor caretaker after all. He was nothing like his grandmother, who was the sweetest. She always treated me better than anyone had ever treated me in life. Very respectfully, yet loving no matter how she was feeling. I knew that she would feel lonely a lot of times, and I felt really bad about it. So I tried my best to be the best company and make her happy when I was taking care of her. And it wasn't that hard, honestly. She was happy while feeding the birds, watering the plants, or when we played chess by the fireplace, so it was an easy task. But she was getting older day by day, and because of that, she was falling sick more often. I was just a caretaker and not a nurse, so she had to make visits and stays at the hospital more often. She could have easily hired an in-house nurse, but she didn't want to do that because that meant there would be no more need for me. "I like having you around," she said whenever I brought up the topic. But then one day something unexpected happened. Her family showed up out of nowhere without any calls or invitations. Mrs. Waters' son, Casper's uncle, then fired me from my job while she was admitted to the hospital. "You're of no use. You're not even a nurse. We're going to live here with her, so you can go your own way," he said, and made me leave so fast that I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to Mrs. Waters. Her son and his wife and children were so mean. It was sad, but I was just a worker, and there was nothing I could do about it as they were her family, so I packed my bags and went off. After that, my life became really different. I got an apartment from the generous salary I had saved from the time I worked at Mrs. Waters. I took a day job and joined a college for the evening. No matter how busy I was, I missed Mrs. Waters a lot of the time. She was, after all, a mother figure to me, which I had never had since I grew up in an orphanage. I even called the house a couple of times to check up on her, but her mean son and daughter-in-law would never let me talk to her or give me any information on her health. One day, however, when I called, she was the one to pick up. "Mrs. Waters, it's Athena," I said in an excited tone as I was happy to finally be able to talk to her. "I know your voice, child," she said, and pretended like she was happy and healthy, but I knew from her voice that she was weak and in pain. However, she did not admit it to me because she knew I could do nothing about it. Like that, we talked for half an hour, and I told her all that was going on in my life from the college to my job, and she was very happy for me. But after that, it was time to say goodbye, and I literally cried while hanging up the phone. Also, it was the last time I ever talked to her. I felt a little better after talking to her, and was able to focus on my work and studies better than before in the next few days. But after that, something so shocking happened in my life that my life turned upside down. It was one of the normal days as usual, and I had just finished my shift at work. I had overworked that day, and because of that, I was running a little late for my classes. So I decided to take a shortcut through a silent, abandoned alley that day, and not take my regular path. It was a scary place even in the daytime, so I never took the path ever, but that day, I had no choice. So I walked very fast as I was walking through there, and sooner than I had thought, I got closer to the end of the alley. I felt such a relief that I was going to be out of there soon, but I later realized that I decided to feel relieved a little bit too soon because that changed in no time. When I finally got out of the alley, a masked man was waiting for me out there, with his van blocking my way of escape. As soon as he saw me, he pushed me inside the van, grabbed me, taped my mouth, and tied my legs and hands. His grip was so strong that I couldn't do anything about it, and it all happened so quickly that I didn't even get a chance to scream for help. And even if I had screamed, it wouldn't have made a difference, as there was not even a single person out there. After he was done tying me up, he went in front of the van and started driving. Meanwhile, I was trying and struggling to get out of the ropes and the tape. "Stop struggling. It's not going to come off," the man said, but I was not going to stop. I kept on moving and struggling, but after a while, I got tired and fell asleep right there. I woke up sometime later to find myself out of the van. However, the place I was at was not the one I recognized. It was strange, but it was not a creepy place where kidnappers take people as we see in movies. It was a good room with a nicely made bed, a table with a water bottle on it, a sofa, and a chair to which I was tied. Yes, my hands and legs were still tied, but my mouth was not taped like before. So I took my chance and started screaming for help. But then the masked kidnapper entered the room. "Would you shut up?" he said, and started taking off his mask. You're not going to get away with this," I screamed at him, but then I couldn't say a word when he was done taking off the mask. The person behind the mask, or more importantly, the one who kidnapped me, was none other than Casper the Millionaire, Mrs. Waters' grandson. I instantly started wondering why he had kidnapped me. He's a millionaire, and I'm just a poor girl. Getting ransom cannot be the reason, I thought. Then my thoughts went to a Korean drama that I had watched the night before, where the things that were happening to me at the moment had happened. The romantic cheesy stuff, like how the girl gets kidnapped by the millionaire and they fall in love. After that, my thoughts shifted to how handsome Casper was and how good his hair looked, and that I was no longer scared about being kidnapped. As I came back to reality from my thoughts, I realized that Casper had been talking to me all that time, but I hadn't heard a single word. "Sorry, what were you saying?" I said, because he stopped speaking just as I started listening. "I said, stop screaming and trust me," he replied, and that was all he said that day, and for the next few days I was there. He only came into the room a few times in the day to give me food and water and books to read, and the books he gave me were the ones related to classes I was taking in college. I was so glad that he had an interest in the things about my life and was crushing on him more and more every day, and I always wondered what he must think about me, but he never talked. Especially not when I asked him answers for why he had kidnapped me and had me chained. One day he came into the room with some food and surprisingly unchained me. "I'm going outside. You're safe inside, so just stay in until I return," he said in a serious tone and went off. After he went out, I started overthinking about the things he had said just before leaving. What did he mean by "you're safe inside"? I thought, and also about the worst possible scenarios, but I stayed in as he had asked me to. However, hours after hours passed, and there was no sign of him returning, so I started getting worried. I was scared for him since he didn't return so long, so I decided to go out to find him. I got out of the room and the house I was in to find myself in a town I didn't recognize, but I saw a diner nearby, so I went in there to see if anyone would lend me their phone to use. But when I went in, I completely forgot about the phone as something else caught my attention. A big TV right in front of the counter. However, it wasn't the size of the TV that got my attention. It was what was going on in it. There was a picture of me on the news, and the story was going on, so I asked the woman there to turn up the volume, and what I found out next was both extremely heartbreaking and shocking. The heartbreaking part about the thing I found out was that Mrs. Waters had passed away a few weeks back, right about the time I was kidnapped by the millionaire. And then came the shocking part. I found out that Mrs. Waters had left half of her multi-million fortune to me in her will, a quarter to Casper, and the remaining to the charity. "That's not just it," someone said from behind. I turned around to see that it was Casper. "After finding out that Grandma had left her fortune to you, I overheard my uncle and aunt conspiring to kidnap you, take the money, and make you disappear from the face of the earth," he explained. He also told me that he informed the police about it before anything could happen, and kidnapped me instead to keep me safe, and then gathered evidence against them. And so the news was about the family who was conspiring against me getting arrested. "I am sorry it had to be like this, and I had to kidnap you," he said, being apologetic. I was so happy thinking about how he was keeping me safe all that time, and I was even blushing a little bit. "Well, you didn't listen to me for once about staying in," he said again, and smiled at me. I smiled back and got a little shy, realizing how it was the most he had ever talked to me at once. "Anyway, you're safe now and rich, so you're free to do whatever you want," he added. And suddenly I felt like it was then or never, so I just said it out loud. "I want to go out with you." Trust me, it was the most courageous thing I had ever done. He smiled and told me that he had always wanted to do that. So just like that, all of our problems were solved. and our lives were easy and Casper and I began dating. Thanks for watching. How did you meet your crush? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
They still don't know that I am actually not my brother. Call me crazy, but I had to do what I did. I mean, he stole my girlfriend, the one that I loved for many years. So, of course, I would retaliate. No one ever thought that I could do such a thing. But here it is, my darkest side exposed. If you would ask me a couple of years ago about the relationship between me and my girlfriend Cindy, I would say it was perfect. We had everything. We had the chemistry, the compatibility, the love. I mean, we were simply the perfect couple, or so I thought at the time. What I would come to find out later in my life would shock me. Like every other good thing that comes to an end, my relationship with Cindy came crashing down. It didn't just happen out of nowhere. In fact, it started so slow that neither of us could pinpoint the exact timeline when we started being toxic for each other. At first, it was just a matter of differences. For example, we wouldn't agree on watching the same things on TV. Then, disagreements slowly grew to arguments, arguments to fights, and fights to toxicity. Now, we were staying with each other just for the sake of love, because no matter if we were always fighting, we also loved each other so much at the same time. And I'll be damned, I thought it was meant to be. After a year and a half of a relationship, I decided to invite her to New Year's Eve with my family. I had never introduced her to anyone before, so this was kind of a big deal for me. I also introduced her to my twin brother, who was a licensed therapist. "Hi, you must be Cindy," said my brother while shaking her hand. "Jacob doesn't bring every girl to meet with the family, so congrats." Immediately after that statement, Cindy gave me a fierce look. I was shocked at first, but I just brushed it off as a misunderstanding. Then later, while everyone was at the dinner table and I got up to go to the bathroom, she followed me and started arguing. "What did your twin brother mean by Jacob doesn't bring every girl here?" she asked me. "Are there other girls you're dating besides me?" "No, and I don't know what he meant by that," I replied, annoyed from the accusation. "What do you mean you don't know? He's your twin brother, and you're obviously hiding something," she yelled at me. "So what if he's my brother? I'm not supposed to be inside his mind, and I'm not hiding anything. Can you please stop accusing me?" "No, because he said you don't bring every girl here, which means you brought me here, but not the other girls you're seeing," she burst out in anger. "There are no other girls. Are you delusional? If you want to know what he meant, let's ask him what he meant. God damn it, I'm getting tired of this," I yelled back at her. In the meantime, my twin brother and my parents were standing behind us. They heard us arguing and thought something was wrong. I could see my twin brother smirking since he heard his name in the conversation. "I can see you're having a trust argument," said my brother calmly. "I'm sorry that I'm the reason that you're accusing Jacob of having multiple partners. I'll rephrase myself. What I really meant was that he never brought here any previous girlfriend he dated before you. I hope you're clearer now," he said to Cindy. "On the other hand, I can see that you guys have underlying issues in your relationship. As a licensed therapist, I would love to help," continued my twin brother. At first thought, couple counseling seemed like a good idea for both of us. But on second thought, my twin brother, being the therapist, was really uncomfortable for me. "No thanks, we're fine," I said. "Oh, come on, we're not fine," said Cindy. "We definitely need help to go back to where we were at the beginning of our relationship." "Come on, Jacob, what do you say?" asked my brother. "I promise to be as professional as possible." Okay, let's give it a try, but only because we fight a lot and I'd like to stop," I agreed. "Okay, great. I'll see you in my office," said my twin brother. After a week or so, I and Cindy went to my brother's office. There, we tried to talk things over between us, but it seemed like we were fighting even more. I was feeling drained with each passing day, and I even started to give up. Cindy, on the other hand, started falling for my twin brother. How would I know? Well, the therapy sessions went from us arguing to Cindy and my twin brother having long conversations together. With each passing day, he was trying to understand her better and better. Now, whenever we would argue, she would mention him. Why can't you be more like your twin brother? He knows what I want and he listens to me, Cindy said to me one day. Are you falling for him? I asked her. Of course not, silly. He's your brother. Why would I? I'm just saying that you should be more understandable, she said. I tried to believe her, but there was something inside of me that couldn't quite make the connection. I had this strange gut feeling that told me to keep alert and look furthermore for signs. So I decided to stir things up a little bit. After 3 months of therapy, I decided to call it quits. I thanked my twin brother, and we never went to his office again. I did this purposely to see how Cindy was going to react now that she wouldn't meet my twin again. And to be honest, it worked perfectly. Why don't we ask your brother out for dinner? To thank him for all the hard work on our relationship. You know that we're happy because of him, asked Cindy one night. I don't really have time this week. I'm swamped with meetings, I replied, smirking. Oh, then maybe I can go out with him and thank him for both of us. What do you think? Asked Cindy. I stared at her face to see if she was serious with that sentence or not. Sure, I replied. What place do you have in mind? I asked. Oh, I haven't thought about it, but I think that Italian restaurant where we always used to go would be perfect. He loves Italian food, doesn't he? She giggled. I don't know, does he? I asked. So they went out without me. And what did I do in the meantime? It's not like I stalked them to see if they would do anything behind my back. After all, I trusted them. Well, the truth is that I did not stalk them, but also the truth was that I didn't trust them. That's why I let them alone, to just get the chance to see where this was going in the future. And they did not disappoint. Almost every afternoon, I would catch Cindy texting on her phone, but when I would ask her about it, she would say that it was with a coworker. I never accused her of anything, and I never even checked her phone. I just let them be for a couple of months because I was curious how this would all end up, and it did not end up well. One night, Cindy was running late. After several calls from my side, I just decided to go out myself. I went to a bar that I would go to frequently years ago. I was just about to order a drink when I saw them and my heart hit my throat. My twin brother and Cindy were sitting at a corner, making out with each other. It wasn't even one quick kiss that could be considered a vulnerability of the moment. They were really making out like they had done this before many times. I felt like throwing up. I simply left the bar as fast as I could before they saw me. I went home, and when Cindy returned, I just played dumb. I wanted to just burst in anger, but I refrained myself and kept my calm. The next weekend, I brought Cindy again to my parents' home for a barbecue, and my brother was there too. I noticed them exchanging looks with each other, and there was a lot of sexual tension in the air. My brother went inside to go to the bathroom, and Cindy followed him with the excuse of getting another drink. That was my chance to catch them bare-handed. So I followed them, and what I saw in my parents' living room was outrageous. Cindy was with her back on the wall, and she was kissing my brother passionately while he was rubbing himself on her. I was grossed out by the fact they would do such a thing at my parents' house, but this time I had the guts to just stand there and call them out. Cindy opened her eyes, saw me, and jumped, surprised. My twin brother took a second to figure out what was going on, so he tried to kiss her again. She tried to warn him. Wait, he knows, Jacob knows, Cindy screamed while trying to stop my twin brother from touching her. What are you talking about? Have you told him? Said my brother. He's standing right behind us, you idiot, yelled Cindy. My twin brother turned around and went pale when he saw me. So this is what you two have been doing the whole time, huh? I asked. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Should we be ashamed? Look who's talking. If you would have the guts to treat me well, I wouldn't have a reason to cheat on you, yelled Cindy. In the meantime, my brother was just standing there looking at us, arguing, too ashamed to say anything. I finally had enough of them, and I decided to just leave the house. I went back to our apartment. I packed up and I hit the road. At that moment, I was strangely envying my twin brother and hating my life. But while on the highway, I had a sudden realization that was inspired by pure revenge. My brother and I look the same. He probably has notes about Cindy in his office that can come in handy to know her at a deeper level. I love her, and I cannot stand the fact that she cheated on me. But I also want to be with her. What if I could kidnap my brother and take over his life? I turned the car around and stopped at the first tool shop that I found near me. I got a rope, a Band-Aid, and 4 pairs of shirts with the style that my brother would wear. I put them all in a bag and headed towards my brother's house. Cindy was there already, but they didn't know that I was coming for them. I went from the back and entered the house. Soon as I saw my brother alone in the kitchen, I hit him in the head and dragged his body outside. I tied him up in the trunk and put a Band-Aid on his mouth. I wore the kind of shirt that he had on and I went inside the house again. When Cindy saw me, she fell immediately for it. She grabbed me behind my neck and kissed me passionately, thinking that I was my brother. "I'm going out to get some fresh air," I said to her and headed for the porch. I came back after 3 minutes holding a letter in my hands. I showed the letter to her, being supposedly from me, telling her about going to China to never come back. Cindy became so happy at that moment that she was jumping from joy of not having to see me again. She continued cooking as I headed back outside to take care of my twin's body. He was awake and terrified. "You thought you could steal my girlfriend that easily, and I would do nothing about it?" I said to him. "She thinks I'm you, and I will use that to my advantage. In the meantime, let me take you to a place where you're going to love staying," I concluded with a smirk.
My twin sister Hazel and I were home alone that night. Our parents were at a reunion party at their friend's house, and they were staying over. At around midnight, we heard some noise coming from downstairs. As we were fast asleep in our room, that noise startled us. Hazel was sleeping on her bed next to mine, and after hearing that sound, she turned to me and said in her sleepy voice, "What's that sound?" "Must be a cat or a raccoon getting on the trash can," I replied. She agreed, and we didn't think much of it, but suddenly, just a moment later, the door to our room swung open. We instantly got up and looked towards the door. There, in the dark, we saw 2 figures running towards us fast. But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and activate the notification bell. This will let you live 20 amazing years longer. Trust me, it works. Before we could scream or reach for our phones, each of the masked people shut our mouth using a cloth that had a weird smell. I looked at Hazel from the corner of my eye and saw that she was struggling to get out of the person's grip like I was doing, but we couldn't as they were big and much stronger than us. A few minutes later, my eyes started to feel heavy and I passed out. When I was conscious again, I was not in my room. I, along with Hazel and the 2 intruders, were in our parents' room. They had tied our hands and legs, tied us to a chair, and taped our mouths shut. Meanwhile, they were trying to pick the lock of the safe in the room. But they saw that we were conscious, so one of them came to us and said, "I'm going to open one of your tapes and you're going to answer what we ask. If you try to scream, it wouldn't be good." Then he pulled out a gun and showed it to us and put it back away. After that, he reached for the tape on my mouth and took it off. As he had said, I didn't scream or say anything. "Do you know the passcode of this safe?" he asked. "No, we don't," I replied. We honestly had no idea as we never paid attention to the safe. "When's your birthday?" he asked again. "September 20th?" I replied, and the other person tried to put it in as a code, but the safe didn't open. The man that was asking questions got angry and taped my mouth shut again, but then Hazel started making a sound from underneath the tape. I knew that she used to get suffocated quickly, but the intruders didn't. So I started making noise as well to get their attention. "Shut them up, I can't focus," the one working on the safe said. So the other one came to us again and this time opened the tape from Hazel's mouth. "What?" he said. "I can't breathe like this," she replied. He went to the other guy and whispered something into his ear. Next thing you know, they were carrying us down to our basement. They dropped us there, our hands and feet were still tied, but they took the tape off of our mouth. "Okay, you go to work on the safe and I'll guard them," one said. "I need you up there. We need to break the safe," the other replied. Then the guy with the gun looked at us and said, "Don't try to scream or try to be smart. I'll blow your heads off." And they went upstairs again to my parents' room, locking the basement door. In the dark, Hazel and I were trying very hard to undo the rope that they had tied to our hands. We were constantly trying and failing. It was not an easy job, obviously. "It's not working." Hazel was crying in disappointment. She was afraid, and so was I. "Just keep trying," I replied, and kept trying myself. A few moments later, Hazel gasped. "Yes!" She was doing it, finally freeing herself out of the rope. After untying the ropes on her own hands and legs, she came to me and untied mine. We hugged each other and then started talking about what we should do next in a very low voice. "What do we do now?" Hazel asked, and honestly, I didn't have a single clue about that. But suddenly I remembered something. A few days before, my dad's poor handyman skill had caused a crack in the basement's window, and if we strike it one more time, the glass would come off, giving us a way out. But there was a catch. The breaking of the glass would make a sound, and the window was so small, only one of us could get out at a time. That meant we would have only enough time for one of us to get out before the intruders came down after the sound. It was me or my sister. No matter the catch, I decided to tell the idea to my sister. "One of us has to stay here," I said after telling her the full plan. "You should go and get help," I said again, as I wanted her to be safe. But she didn't agree. "Harley, everyone knows that you're the marathon champion and fastest runner in our school. You should go and get help. They might catch me, but they won't be able to catch you," she said. So we decided that I was the one to go out and my sister was going to stay there and distract them if they came down. Then we tried to find a heavy object in the dark with very little light, but since it was the basement, it wasn't hard. Hazel instantly found a hammer. We wasted no time and went towards the window. I looked at my sister and said, "I'll come back soon." After that, I climbed a box to reach the window, and as soon as I did, I hit the glass with a hammer. As we had predicted, it made a loud sound, so I immediately cleared the glass and climbed out. Then I started running without looking back even once. I instantly ran to my neighbors across the street and started knocking on the door. "Mr. Harris, please open the door," I cried as I knocked, but they didn't answer, so I didn't waste any more time there. Quickly, I ran to another neighbor's house and started knocking, but there too I got no response. But I had to keep trying, so I ran to another neighbor's, Stafford's house. I knocked on their door and screamed, "Mr. and Mrs. Stafford, please, open the door." The light of the porch turned on and the door opened. Mr. Stafford saw me and asked, "Harley, what are you doing here at this time?" I told him that our house had been broken into and everything that had happened. He let me in and immediately called the police. He gave them our address and handed me the phone to call my parents. So I did. I called my parents and told them everything. They told me that they would be home instantly. Soon we heard police car sirens, so we went out and walked towards my house. There were 2 police cars parked in front of our house. They had just reached and were getting out of the car. As we were walking in, we saw that our front door was wide open. We immediately went in to see that the intruders were already gone and that they had opened my parents' safe as well. But that was not the important thing. So the first thing I did was run to the basement with the police. There, I saw my sister. She had been tied again and her mouth was shut with tape. She was crying. I hurriedly removed the tape from her mouth and untied the ropes. As soon as I did that, she hugged me and cried even more. "What happened?" I asked. She told us that as soon as I got out, they came down. As they saw the window broken and that I wasn't there, the gunman took out his gun and put it to her head. "Didn't I tell you not to act smart?" he said. But the other one interrupted and said that they had to leave. So he slapped her hard. He was angry because of which she fell on the floor and then tied her and left. But what she told me next made me so proud of her. She told us that when he had a gun to her head, she went for his jacket and took out his purse. And as she fell, she threw it under a shelf. Since the guy was so angry, he didn't even notice. So I went to the shelf, crouched down, and pulled a purse from under there. I gave it to the police officer without opening it. She opened it and found a driver's license, but the photo was cut out from it. "Henry Baker," she read out. "Does your family have anything to do with Henry Baker?" she asked. "No, not that we know of," I replied. Then she called her office and asked to look him up in the system. After that, we heard someone calling our name from upstairs. "Hazel? Harley?" It was our parents. So we went upstairs, and as we reached, they came running towards us and hugged us. Then the police officer asked our parents to check the safe and see what items were missing. My mom quickly ran in and went through everything in the safe. After what she said next, we were all left confused. "Nothing is missing from here. All the cash and pieces of jewelry are here," she said. "So why did they go through all the trouble of breaking into your house and then your safe?" the officer asked. After she said that, my father rushed towards the safe to check for something. "They took my drive," he said with a worried look on his face. He told the officer that he had a drive in the safe that had decades of our family business records, and it was very important as it could disclose all of our clients' information. So we had only one thing to do: go to the address of Henry Baker as quickly as possible. For that, the police officer asked my dad to come along. "One of you sisters should come with us to identify him," she said. It was again me or my sister. I looked at Hazel and saw that she was pretty shaken up, so I told the officer that I would go along. I got into my dad's car and we followed behind the police car. After driving for about half an hour, we made a stop in front of an old apartment building. We got out of the car and started making our way into the building behind the police officers. The elevator of the building was not working, so we had to take the stairs. The address said he lived on the 3rd floor. When we reached in front of his door, the police officers told us to stay behind. They knocked on the door and from inside a man came shouting, "Who is it this late?" he said and opened the door. I instantly recognized his voice. It was that guy with the gun. "It's him!" I screamed, and the officers quickly grabbed him and cuffed him before he could run or do anything, and took him inside. We also went in to find that he wasn't the only one in the apartment. There were 2 other guys who also surrendered to the police. My dad said that he recognized one of the guys. He told the police that the 3rd guy, who was not one of the intruders, was his business rival. That meant he was the mastermind and that he had hired the gunman and the locksmith to break into our house and steal the drive, to steal our business secrets and clients. The police arrested them and were about to take them to jail, but I had unfinished business with the gunman, so I went up to him and I punched him on the nose. "That's for hurting my sister," I said. And then my dad and I headed home. Thanks for watching. Have you ever had to choose between you and your sibling? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.
My parents were finally going out that day. It was only to pick up the groceries, but it was still a big deal for me. They never left my side. I was always in the presence of either mom or dad or both. I didn't get why they were so protective of me. They were protective to the extent they never let me leave the house. I was always inside the house looking out the window. I felt like Rapunzel in her tower sometimes. When I looked out the window, I saw kids playing, running towards school buses, and whatnot. When I asked my parents why I couldn't be like other children, they always had an excuse. They even counter-questioned me. What if you get lost or kidnapped? But before we move on, like this video, hit that subscribe button, and activate the notification bell. This will let you live 20 amazing years longer. Trust me, it works. One day, when I was about 7, I saw my dad talking on the phone near the window. I went to him and said in my baby voice, "Dad, I want to go to school." He stopped talking and hung up the phone. He looked at me and I saw his face was going red. Although he didn't say a word, I knew he was getting angry. At that moment, my mom came rushing in and said, "We are homeschooling you. Don't bother your dad. If you have any questions, ask me." I had been scared of my dad ever since to that day, and I was already in my teens. That was why I always did what they said. I behaved, stayed inside the house, and never bothered my dad. I had only been out 2 or 3 times on the grocery run with my mom. That time too, her eyes were fixed at me like a hawk. That was why when they left to go out, it was a relief for me. I could finally be alone. I could get a sense of privacy and freedom, even though it was inside a house. Usually, when I was alone, I liked exploring the house. I thought that was the only way I could figure out why my parents were so protective and why my dad was so angry. I had searched the attic and even my parents' rooms a few times before, but I couldn't find anything. That day, I was facing my fears and going down the basement. It was scary down there, but I hoped I would find something. I turned on the lights of the basement, headed down there. Even with the lights on, this is scary, I said to myself. But I was right. There were so many things there. Some of the things looked way too old. There was this old television, my old crib, and so many papers. I started going through the papers. It looked like some kind of bookkeeping of money, and there were so many names. Are my parents taking money from people, I thought? As I was going through a huge box of papers, I felt something hard in there. It was another rather smaller box. I opened it and saw that it was filled with videotapes. 5 to be exact. I was not very much interested in them until I saw one of them was labeled. It said,
Claire Baker's dead. As soon as I read that, I knew something was in there that I needed to figure out. First, I needed to check if that old TV still worked. I plugged it into a switch and turned it on. Then I popped the videotape in. I was shocked at what I saw. On the television screen, there were my mom and dad. My mom was holding a baby, and my dad was pointing a gun at someone's head. It was a man, and there was another woman. They were both down on their knees. The woman was crying. She was saying, "Please don't take my baby girl from me. I will find some other way to pay you back." My mom started speaking. "You've had your chance, Claire. You don't get another. You should know after all these years in mob business." Then my dad spoke. "We will sell her when she is old enough. Your debt will then be reimbursed. Don't come looking for her or even think about contacting the police. Otherwise, we will kill her and then you." The tape popped out. My whole world crumbled in front of me. I couldn't believe what I just saw. My parents were mobs. At that moment, it hit me. They were not even my parents. I was that baby in the video, and they were talking about selling me. I was kidnapped. I was raised by my kidnappers. I heard the sound of my fake parents' car. Oh no, they're back. I hurriedly put all the things back to where they were, but I had to take the videotape, so I put it in my pocket. I ran to the basement door, closed it, and headed upstairs to my room. Right when I was about done walking up the stairs, my fake mom opened the door. She saw me and asked, "What were you doing downstairs?" I was so scared. After all the things I saw, I was horrified of who they were. I wanted to cry, but I didn't want them to suspect anything. In a shaky voice, I replied, "I was in the kitchen to drink some water." "Okay, don't get out of your room unless we're here for the next time," she said. I rushed to my room and closed the door. I was just catching my breath when I remembered I forgot to turn off the basement lights. They would end me if they found out. I sat on my bed, scared, and I started to think. All those times, I did everything they said because they were my parents. Or at least I thought so. I didn't want to hurt or disappoint them. But not anymore. I made up my mind that when night falls and when my fake parents are fast asleep, I will escape. I sat there pacing back and forth. My eyes were fixated at the clock. One after another, hours passed. It was getting darker outside. The kidnapper mom brought dinner to my door, knocked and left. I went out and brought in the food and ate it. I knew I would need energy if I were to escape. I waited till it was almost midnight. I put on my hood and tied my shoes to my bag. I didn't want to put them on until I got out. I didn't want to risk them hearing the footsteps. I slowly opened my door and tiptoed to their room. The front door had a security lock code. My only way was through the back door, and my fake mom had the keys to it. They were both fast asleep. I saw the keys on her bedside table. I tiptoed there, grabbed the keys very gently, making no noise at all. I tiptoed back and slowly closed the door. It was dark, but I didn't hit anything as I walked only around the house all my life. I was a little happy that my escape plan was coming together so well. I was almost out of the house. There was only one door in between my freedom. I inserted the key and tried to open the door, but it wouldn't open. I tried again and again. It was bright all of a sudden. Someone turned the lights on. "Now where do you think you're going?" It was my fake dad. I turned around in horror. He came towards me and grabbed my hands. I started screaming, "Let me go! Let me go!" Then the fake mom entered. "Do you think we're fools? We know you went down to the basement. What did you find? Tell us." "I know you're not my parents. You are bad people," I cried. "That's good. We don't have to keep up the act anymore." she said. The fake dad pushed me up to my room and threw me in. I landed on the floor. Before closing the door, he said in a monstrous tone, "Soon, we will use you for the reason we took you. Very soon." I didn't move from that spot. I lied right there and kept on crying and crying. I cried about how unlucky I was and how I could do nothing about it. I fell asleep right there at some point. The next morning, I woke up. It was cold and my eyes were puffy after all the crying. I watched the sun ray enter my room slowly. I am not going to give up, I whispered to myself. I heard some noises coming from downstairs. I went down to see those kidnappers were setting an alarm system and security lock code on the back door as well. I went to my room and kept myself locked in for the whole day that day. I thought of 100 things I could do to escape, but nothing was good enough. The next day, I was sitting in my room. I was out of ideas, hungry, and drained of energy. I heard something outside the window. It was the neighbors. They were all outside playing. With all the energy left in me, I started screaming at them. "Help! Help! There's a fire! I'm locked in my room!" One man came running towards our house to help. I knew this was it. I put on my shoes, unlocked my room, and went towards the stairs. The man rang the bell, and the fake mom opened the door. She let him come inside. I knew that was the last chance I would ever get if I wanted to escape. I ran downstairs and out the door in a flash and kept on running and running and running. I stopped when I felt I have come far enough from that house. I didn't know what to do next. I hadn't planned for that. I was confused. I was outside a cafe. Someone was waving to me from the inside. It was a boy of my age. He signed me to come in. I didn't know what to do, so I went in. He asked me to sit, and so I did. "You look lost," he said. "Can I eat your donut?" I was so hungry I couldn't even focus on anything else. "Sure, go ahead," he said. He looked kind. After some time, I realized that I had that videotape in my pocket. I took it out and said to him, "Can you find Claire Baker's address for me on your computer?" "Well, you're in luck. I will do it," he said. After a couple of minutes, he showed me the screen of his computer with a couple of pictures. "Which one?" he said. I looked at it and pointed at that lady that looked like the one in the videotape. "It seems she changed her name to Claire James a few years ago, but I have her address," he said. He wrote it on a piece of paper and gave it to me. I thanked him and assured him we'll meet someday in the future. Then I left. I was walking toward the bus station when a man suddenly stopped his car in front of me. He was a stranger. He popped his head out the window. "Do you need a ride to somewhere, sweetheart?" he said. I thought I met another kind person and asked him if he could take me to the bus station. He said he would, so I got into his car. But as soon as I got into his car, he turned it around. He pulled up his phone and said to someone, "I have her." I was terrified. I started screaming and kicking. I kept on kicking and hitting him. He lost his balance, so he stopped the car. I opened the door, got out, and ran for my life. He was following me in the car, and I could hear it behind me. I saw a police car and ran towards it. I knocked on the door, and the policeman came out. The car that was following me speeded off. I told the policeman everything. I was out of my breath. The policeman assured me that I was safe. He even gave me a ride to my real parents' house. I reached the house. It was big and beautiful. I rang the doorbell. A lady opened the door, the same one from the videotape. I pulled out the videotape from my pocket and showed it to her. She looked at me and hugged me instantly. "I will never lose you again, baby," she said. Thanks for watching. Do you think your parents are your real parents? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe and check out other videos on the channel.